Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today, virtually, if not in person. I was truly honored when Truman asked me to present this award. For those of us with a very long memory, or perhaps slightly obscure film watching habits, you might remember a 1985 Ken Burns documentary called The Statue of Liberty. The film, as you can imagine, explored the history of the statue, but it was also interwoven with a broader history of what the statue means to individual Americans. There's a narration by David McCullough, readings by Jeremy Irons and Arthur Miller, and in between, interviews with icons like Ray Charles and Barbara Jordan. There's a short clip also of a pair of young Ukrainian twins sitting with their grandmother. The boys, who are not more than 10 years old, sit on a bench, and their grandmother sits between them. They explain, more like talking over one another as twins often do, that they'd come to America through Italy from Ukraine after a family tragedy. Alexander and Yevgeny Vindman didn't say much in the film, but their message was clear. America had welcomed them in their time of need. It's amazing that 3.5 decades later, we're honoring one of those boys tonight for living up to the values that the Statue of Liberty has so long represented to all of us. But as we've come to learn over the past year, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman's love of this country and the very idea of America is deeply rooted. Alexander's family settled in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, and after graduating from Roosevelt High, he went to SUNY Binghamton. I've often found immigrants to be some of the most enthusiastic and devoted Americans. To them, America is an idea, a promise, not just a birthright. They know just how fragile democracy and freedom can be, and many of them dedicate themselves to serving America, to fighting for it. They see the contrast to the less free, less open, and less optimistic places that they left behind. And so while at college, Alexander honored that impulse by enrolling in ROTC. After graduation, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Lieutenant Alexander Vindman took his duties quite seriously. He served in Germany and South Korea before being deployed to Iraq. I would trust him with my life, is what his commander said of him. Alexander received a Purple Heart when he was wounded by a roadside bomb. But he continued to serve, putting his knowledge of Russian and Ukrainian to good use as an Army Foreign Area officer specializing in Eurasia. He served in our embassies in Moscow and Kiev before returning to Washington to work for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He reached the pinnacle of his career when he joined the National Security Council staff as its Ukraine expert. It's no less remarkable that he was serving in the White House alongside his twin brother, Yevgeny, his kid brother, as he likes to say, also an Army lieutenant colonel at the NSC. In fact, all three Vindman brothers had pursued careers in military service, serving their country. It was there at the White House that Alexander took part in that now infamous phone call between our president and Ukraine's. As we've all heard before, Alexander was alarmed by what transpired on the call. He suspected it was criminal, he later said, but he knew it was wrong. And he was faced with the most difficult decision of his career. Should he, as an American by choice, report misconduct, not only of a senior officer, but of the commander-in-chief himself? Or should he put his head down, stay quiet, and not rock the boat and jeopardize his career? I won't presume to know exactly what Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was thinking as he came to his conclusion, but I suspect, knowing him, there was no choice at all. Alexander knew that there was only one honorable course to follow. He had to uphold his oath, to support and defend the Constitution, no matter the consequences. And so he did something more courageous than probably anything he'd ever had to do in combat. He testified to Congress and spoke truth against the most powerful person in the world. His career had survived multiple continents, a combat tour, and a roadside bomb. But it was in Washington, for upholding the rule of law, a core American ideal, that it came to an end, or at least that chapter came to an end. As a nation, We have been so shaken this past year and suffered so much loss. That's why it's more important than ever to pause and take stock of what and who really matters. I've had the privilege to serve in the Pentagon and work alongside thousands of dedicated servicemen and women and civil servants over the years. They're not just protecting America and American lives, they're protecting the American project. And they're doing so by following the principles that this award recognizes: courage and patriotism, service and honor. And I can say this without a doubt. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is exactly who we should want serving in our armed forces and in our government. He is America at its best. His courage, his resilience are a true inspiration. Despite losing his military career, Alexander has kept his faith with America. I did my duty as an American citizen and an Army officer, he said. And he said at the impeachment hearing, the mere fact that he was there and able to speak freely was proof that his father made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come to the United States of America. Don't worry, he told his father. I'll be fine for telling the truth. And Alexander has been fine. He's now enrolled in a PhD program at SAIS and is finding new ways to serve his country. And because courageous Americans like him, including many courageous immigrants, are ready to stand up for the institutions that make our country great, we know that America will be fine as well. I look forward to following Alexander's career with great interest. But first, I'm so glad and honored to have the opportunity to present Alexander Vindman with the Truman Award for Extraordinary Moral Courage in Public Service. And I'll now read the citation. For extraordinary dedication to the ideals of our nation, even when acting on those ideals threatened his career and when doing so placed his family in jeopardy. For holding faith with the greatest tradition of the American Armed Forces, which holds that every officer's duty is neither to party nor politician, but to our nation and its ideals. For serving as an inspiration for all of us to live up to our Constitution. We present the Truman Award for Exceptional Moral Courage in Public Service to Lieutenant Colonel Retired Alexander Vindman. Alex, I hope that in some small way this demonstrates to you that America is keeping faith with you as you have kept faith with her. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Flournoy. Thank you very much. Greetings, everyone, wherever you are. It's good to be with you. Thank you to Truman for this remarkable recognition. Since its establishment, Truman has been dedicated to getting good people into government. There are few better initiatives. I am honored to receive the Truman Award for Exceptional Moral Courage in Public Service, and I am pleased as well to have it presented by the Honorable Dr. Michelle Flournoy, a distinguished public servant for whom I have the greatest deal of respect. During award shows, entertainers and athletes often exclaim in their acceptance speeches that they cannot believe they are receiving an award for doing something they love to do. I know how they feel. On a cold Saturday last December, when the nation was still in the grips of impeachment, my family and I attended 2 holiday parties hosted by dear colleagues. On the way home, my wife marveled about the people she'd met and the great conversations she'd had. I just smiled and replied, "Now do you see why I love my job so much?" Today, perhaps more than ever, some Americans don't understand the appeal of public service or the value of contributing to something larger than one's own personal financial security. But for me, for those involved in Truman, for many of you, public service is the most fulfilling profession we could ever imagine. I've had the privilege to serve in battle alongside soldiers, patriotic Americans willing to place the nation's defense above their own personal safety. I've had the privilege to serve alongside America's most skilled diplomats in far-off embassies and advance America's interests. I've had the privilege to serve in the Pentagon and White House alongside of some of the nation's most capable and most senior national security professionals. And I've had the privilege to stand by my values and convictions and offer testimony before Congress and help protect our democracy and hold accountable abuse of power. What connects me and all of the people I have served with during the course of my career is the common view shared by all of those in public service of every race, gender, political ideology, and background that we all have something in common, a desire to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. During the impeachment hearings, we heard from many lifelong public servants. Each person who testified represented thousands of other public servants, people who quietly serve in the public interest day after day. Most will never have their names uttered in public, let alone recognized for their service. We know well that isn't what motivates them. In these anxious times, when norms are being shattered and institutions gutted, I find it helpful to reflect on the immense good that comes from dedicated service to the public. Working quietly and diligently, public servants remain the guardrail for good governments. We are fortunate that these individuals have remained at their posts, even as many of their institutions have been attacked, undermined, and corrupted by political actors abusing power. That's one reason why too many of our most seasoned and brightest officials have left, either voluntarily or not. That represents a huge loss not just to those agencies, but to the public. In this time of pandemic, economic turmoil, and civil unrest, the values of those who work in so many ways for the good of the American people is most apparent. It will be the public servants, professionals, and subject matter experts who get the country through this turbulent time and rebuild in the years ahead. For them to succeed, the United States will need values-based leaders who are accountable to those they serve. During my time in the military, I was fortunate to serve under leaders of integrity and compassion. It is natural for dedicated people to disagree, but good leaders inspire people with differing opinions to come together and work towards a common objective. The Army teaches all soldiers the Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. The Army also expects its leaders to obey the law and make on-the-spot corrections when they see something wrong. That is how I was taught to be a leader in the military. As a young officer, I observed young soldiers go through an evolution after putting on the uniform. It is a testament to the Army values that people from different racial, political, ethnic, economic, and religious backgrounds can adopt and live a set of common values and form a cohesive unit based on them that endures even through the test of combat. In the broader country, we see a similar evolution in immigrants who come here. Although each individual is the pilot of their own destiny, we share a common struggle to improve the world not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors. We are stronger as a woven rope than as an unbound thread. Since the struggle for our nation's independence, it has been a union of purpose that has allowed us to triumph over adversity. For me, believing in that union of purpose has been an essential part of surviving my recent adversity. I went in a short time from being a successful Army officer, a White House staffer, a director on the National Security Council, and a private person who to someone leading newscasts, to someone trending on Twitter, to someone whom everyone, including the most powerful person in the country, had an opinion. The outpouring of support from people all over the globe has buoyed my family and meant more to us than we could ever express. But what I find far more meaningful is being able to look my daughter in the eyes, knowing I spoke up when I witnessed something wrong. In reading the letters, emails, and tweets of support, I have come to understand the elements of my story that resonated most with people was the willingness to do the right thing, even when consequences might make life a lot more difficult. There appears to be in the world today a greater hunger for moral courage and leaders with values than some might suggest. During my testimony, in exchange with one member of Congress, I said that here right matters. Afterwards, when I thought about it, I realized that right meant several things. It meant that right matters in America. It meant that right matters in the context of this historic impeachment investigation. And right mattered to me personally, for my values were being challenged. When it comes to values, uh, compromise is a dangerous and slippery slope because once you concede your values, they become harder to reclaim. No one is perfect, but if you are in the habit of doing the right thing in the right way, that becomes an expectation for yourself. Just recently, I received this message from an Army officer. It said, "Sir, on the birthday of the Constitution, I just want to tell you what you did standing up for our principles gave me a ray of light to hang on and continue serving. It remains the only time I've felt hopeful in the past few years. There are many of us who feel that way. We've all begun to speak more to try to halt the small acts of immorality and non-ethical behavior around us. You've given us hope, sir. I know this is a small consolation for your honorable career, but I hope you will take heart from it. Keep up the fight, sir." This note was very meaningful to me, personally, but it's also a meaningful example of how we can all stand up for our values. It isn't practical for every person to leave when they're disheartened. We need dedicated public servants to stay on, like this officer is doing, and resolve to stand up for ethical behavior. I'm sure there are many people out there wondering if they should speak up, wondering if the implications would be what the implications would be for their career, for their families, for their financial and personal security. To them, I would share the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said it far better than I ever could. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. We need leaders who accept the personal responsibility to do the right thing at the right time, even sometimes when it's the wrong moment. Individuals who recognize that if they want things to change, then they must catalyze that change. These are the leaders we should demand. These are the leaders who will help us turn the page on this dark chapter in the nation's history. When we do, I hope for a public service revival in the spirit of President Kennedy's injunction, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. As we persevere through this crisis, we must shed apathy, defend our institutions, and support our professional public servants and serve the public ourselves. Doing what you can do for your country should not be confused with forfeiture of personal liberty. We as a nation have been the benefactors of countless dedicated Americans that have applied their intellect, effort, and blood, and sometimes their lives to our common purpose. We must again invigorate the spirit across this nation. In the several months after I left the White House, I took the time to reflect on my actions, their consequences, and my own future. I had countless conversations with peers and senior leaders, each offering their unique and invaluable perspective. I was often counseled to take the less risky, safer road and stay in the military. Eventually, I concluded I had to take charge of my destiny. In making my decision to retire, I decided to put my future in my own hands rather than the unsteady hands of others. Sometimes you might have to disregard the opinion of others to exercise moral courage. Even people who love you, maybe especially the people who love you, will often attempt to dissuade you from doing things because they will worry about the personal price you will pay. Throughout the impeachment hearing, my dad was concerned for my safety and well-being. He has come to recognize that I am not in any real physical danger, but to this day remains concerned about ending a successful military career and starting from scratch. That's okay. As we all know, the right decision is not always the most popular decision, but the goal is to live in a manner that is consistent with your values. I'm not done yet. I'm working on my doctorate in international relations at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. But that's just the next step in what I still hope will be a career of public service. I'm also not done believing what's right matters. What has become clear since I left the White House is that we're the ones that have to make sure that right still matters. Right doesn't matter by law or by force. Right matters because day after day, year after year, dedicated Americans ensure it does. I'm still committed to ensuring that right matters. I know Truman is committed. Thank you again for this award. I hope you will remain committed with me. Together we can make sure that right matters here for years to come. Thank you, and go vote.